Dear brothers and sisters, may the peace of Christ be with you. Today is the third Sunday of Advent, and today is also called the Gaudete Sunday, the Sunday of joy. In our antiphon today, the church invites us to rejoice. Why are we rejoicing? We are rejoicing because our salvation is near. In our first reading today, Prophet Isaiah paints a very beautiful picture about our deliverance. Some scholars believe that this first reading was written, pre-exilic, that is, before the exile that the Israelites went into Assyria, Babylonian exile. But whatever we consider here, let us remember that this prophecy is a prophecy of deliverance, a prophecy of restoration, a prophecy for rebuilding, a prophecy for liberation. Now, if you look at what Isaiah says to us today, Isaiah invites us to rejoice. He invites us to celebrate, to exhort. Why? Because he says to us that our Messiah is coming. The splendor of God is very near to us. Why should we celebrate? Why are we supposed to be joyful? Isaiah continues by telling us that when the Messiah comes, he's going to open the eyes of the blind. He's going to make those who could not hear, the deaf, they will hear. Those who could not walk, the lame, they will begin to walk. Those who could not speak, they will begin to speak. Not just that, not just these physical, healings, but Isaiah speaks to us. He invites us to remember that the coming of the Messiah is the coming of our salvation. He is coming to save us. And what is salvation? Salvation is the ultimate union between divinity and humanity. And this salvation is not just eschatological. This salvation begins from here, just as we see in John chapter 17, verse 3, where Jesus personally defines eternal life. So, the salvation that we are waiting for, because Advent is a moment, a time, a period of waiting, expectation for the coming of this salvation. So our Messiah is bringing salvation to us, and this salvation can be depicted in three important ways. In wholeness, Jesus is bringing wholeness to us. He is bringing holiness to us, and eventually he is bringing healing to us, integral healing. And this healing is on the level of our socialization, the societal, the social healing. He is bringing spiritual healing to us. He is bringing emotional healing. So it's an integral healing, a given package. So our Messiah is coming, and Prophet Isaiah says to us that the desert will blossom with flowers. So it will be a time of transformation. It will be a time of change. It will be a time that every of our ugly story will be transformed into beautiful story. And in the last part of this prophecy, Isaiah says to us that sorrows and sadness and mourning, that they will fly away, because our mourning will be turned into laughing, and our tears will be turned into cheers, and our sorrows will become our joy, and our sadness will become our happiness, because the splendor of God will be among us. The presence of God will change our story. The presence of God will transform everything. It is so beautiful when we really meditate and reflect on this which Isaiah has said to us. But remember, what Isaiah has said to us is not something that is going to happen automatically or in a mechanical way. No, it may take a long time, because our God is a God of process. Our God is a God of stage by stage. Our God is a God of step by step. I usually give an example with the creation story. God has absolute sovereignty, dominion, power, authority. He could have created the world in a twinkle of an eye, but intentionally, he took 6 days to create the world. This is why in our second reading today, St. James invites us to do something very important as we are waiting for the fulfillment of the promises of God. As we are waiting, St. James invites us to be patient. If you look at the second reading today, the word patience was mentioned more than 3 times. It is not about whether God is going to do what he has said. Of course, he's going to do it. And that's the first line we see in the first stanza of our responsorial psalm. The faithfulness of God endures forever. God is not a liar. It may take a long time, but I tell you, God will surely fulfill everything he has said. Every of his promise, he will fulfill them. As I said, his faithfulness endures forever. So, St. James invites us to embrace patience, because patience is also an expression of our faith, our trust, our belief in God. Because having patience means that I believe that God will eventually fulfill his promise in my life, no matter how long it takes. But God will eventually and ultimately fulfill the words he has spoken about me and to me. So, patience is very important as we are waiting for the fulfillment of the promises of God to us. And this is also very important for us when we look at the life of John in the gospel today. Many scholars are divided about the reason why John sent that message or asked the question about Jesus. In our lives, when things are moving very well for us, most times we may be tempted to forget God. But everyone remembers God at the moment when we experience crisis and turbulence and challenges and trials. We remember God. John was at this moment, he was already arrested. This is the middle of the ministry of Jesus. So at this moment, John was already in prison. Why was John in prison? He was in prison because he confronted and challenged Herod Antipas, who took his brother's wife, Herodias, and was having a relationship with her. John the Baptist warned Herod Antipas and said, "What you are doing is incest. It is sacrilegious. It is a taboo." Because of this, John was in prison. So in the moment of the crisis that John was experiencing, John had to, ask that question. There are certain things, there are certain times that things begin to happen in your life. You get sick, terminally sick. Your marriage is always having problems, divisions, quarrels, crisis, marital crisis. In your business, you're not doing well. Even though you believe that you have been keeping all the commandments, you have been attending masses, you have been going for confessions, but things are not working out well for you. That moment you experience doubt. You may begin to question God. But we are not saying that John was doubtful. But the fact is that it can happen to any one of us. Some scholars believe that John asked that question in order to open the eyes of his disciples. Whatever reason that made John to ask that question, we put ourselves in the shoe of John. When we experience crisis, when we experience challenges, when we experience suffering, we can ask basic, controversial, necessary questions. What was the response of Jesus to the question of John? Jesus quoted the first reading today. Go and tell John that the lame, that they are walking, the blind, they could see, those who were deaf, they could hear, and those who could not speak, they are now speaking and rejoicing and singing. And after that, Jesus continued by commending John. He continued by speaking good things about John. But he said that John is the least. You know why? because John did not live to see the new kingdom that Jesus has come to establish. That is why you and I, we are greater than John, because we are able to live in the new kingdom. John did not live in the new kingdom. John was an intertestamental prophet. So, but John, we have the same vocation as John. John prepared the way for the coming of the Lord. So, as we continue our journey in this Advent, we are invited also to prepare our hearts to allow the incoming of the Messiah, because that incoming is very important. It is the presence of the Messiah, it is the presence of Christ that gives us joy. That is what joy is all about. Joy is a higher aspect of happiness. Happiness is the lower part of joy. The joy is the presence of God in us, the presence of Jesus in our lives. This presence is very important. Let me say this, that the presence of God in our lives is actually what gives us credence, is what makes our lives authentic. It is what gives us confidence in the moments of our sorrows. It is what gives us confidence in the moments of our weakness. It is what gives us confidence in the moments of our fears. Remember, there's nowhere in the Bible where Jesus made a promise, I will remove your sorrows or sadness. Jesus did not promise us that we will be exempted from sorrows and sadness, but the promise he made to us is the promise of his presence. And that presence is the joy that gives us shock absorber in the moments that we experience shock. That presence, that joy, gives us the grace to overcome our fears, to overcome the pains of our sickness, the pains of our sufferings, the pains of our loss, the pains of the imperfections we experience in this life. That is the joy that we are waiting for. So, dear brothers and sisters, as we celebrate today, this Sunday of joy, can we become joy in the life of another person? Can I be the joy in the life of my husband? Can I be the joy in the life of my wife? Can I be the joy in the life of my children? Can I be the joy in the life of the next person that I am going to encounter? This is a basic question we need to ask ourselves today. And as we celebrate this day, I pray for you that joy of the Lord will be your strength. And thank you for listening. Please do well to share this video.